Uh, I recognize that motion. I would say at this time that the House will have to decide if they want to change the regular order that we're returning to. And if they do decide, I would urge them to consider approximately 6 items and then return to the Regent's action. These 6 items, I would urge them, and I would modify your motion to this extent, that I would like to see the consent calendar completed, the faculty research lecture, recognition of distinguished teaching, the approval of the appointments made by the Committee on Committee, the Graduate Council approval of degrees and programs, and number 6 from the College of L&S, the alternative method of satisfying the English requirement, and then I would go to the Regent's actions, and I think the first 6 things would not take over 15 or 20 minutes.
Well, on the understanding that the time allotted to those items would be brief, that's quite acceptable to me.
With the list having been off, and then be the request for the change of order, this requires 2/3 vote of the Assembly. All those in favor of the order as I have suggested things I want to consider, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
No.
I believe it's necessary 2/3. And now we would take the consent calendar, which consists of the following items on the consent calendar. Namely, it's a report from the Elections Committee, a report from the Rules and Jurisdiction Committee, and a report from Subject A. In neither of these is there any legislation involved. All those in favor of approving this consent calendar? Those opposed? I would now like to recognize Professor von Grunebaum to report on the the faculty research lecture.
The committee to propose the faculty research lecture for 1971 submits the following report for your approval. Professor Gerhard Burjan Ladner, church historian and medievalist, is to be proposed as the next research lecturer. I have prepared a somewhat lengthy appreciation, as it is appropriate for a person of his distinction, but considering that we are pressed for time, I shall shorten it. Professor Ladner, church historian, medievalist, studied history in Vienna, got his PhD in Vienna. He then worked at the Monumenta Germania Historica in Berlin and Munich, became a corresponding member of the central directorate thereof. He afterwards worked in Rome as fellow of the Austrian Historical Institute, becoming docent in Vienna, going over to Toronto, where he taught medieval history and archaeology, later to Notre Dame, Fordham, and finally to us. He has been a member of the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton 3 times, was awarded the Guggenheim Fellowship, and so on and so forth. I shall lift out of the roster of his distinction only the Haskins Gold Medal of the Medieval Academy in '61 and his election as corresponding fellow of the Austrian Academy of Sciences in 1968. I shall skip over his production, which is mostly concerned with the application of methods of art history and diplomatic history to church history. And his book on the iconography of the popes is really not only a first, but a masterpiece which is likely to remain unequaled, certainly within our lifetime. I don't mean mine, but your all. His fame has attracted to him students from all over the Western world. The influence of his work and of his person can be felt everywhere that medieval studies are cultivated. It would be impossible, even as an intellectual experiment, to omit his major contributions from the history of medieval studies in the West. What he has done to consolidate and enlarge Medievalia in this university rounds out the profile of Dr. Ladner's accomplishments, of which his election as faculty research lecturer for '71 would be an indication of our grateful recognition. I move, therefore, that this body approve our proposal.
All those in favor of the recommendation of the committee, please say aye. Those opposed? Now, I would like to turn to the distinguished teaching, recognition of distinguished teaching, Professor Parducci.
Testimonials from students, former students, and colleagues of the nominees would convince, I think, the most hardened skeptic that good teaching is available at UCLA. Our committee had to choose from amongst some 32 well-documented nominations, just 5 for this distinction. I would now like to read to you, in alphabetical order, the names of these 5. Erhard Bahr, Assistant Professor of German. Joseph Cascarano from Zoology. Richard D. Leon from English. B. Lamar Johnson from Education. And Daniel Kivelson from Chemistry. Mr. Chairman, I move that these nominations be approved.
All those in favor of these nominations? Those opposed? I would now like the report from the Committee on Committees regarding their appointments to committees. Professor Hutchison? Not being here, will the Secretary indicate at least the page where these committee appointments are on? They occur on page 69 in the call to the minutes, and the list of appointments are on page 69. All those in approving these appointments? Those opposed? It will be so recorded. Now I would like to turn to the Graduate Council for the approval of degrees and programs which they have to forward, and these occur on page 78, and I would recognize Professor Galbraith if he's here on these degree programs.
Here is on page 78. I would move the approval of the Graduate Council recommendation for interdepartmental program, comprehensive health planning leading to the MS degree.
Is there any comment? All those in favor of the approval of this degree? Those opposed? It will be so approved. Now, is there any action necessary, Professor Galbraith, on the proposals for graduate certificates of specialization on page 82?
Mr. Chairman, the proposal for engineering certificates follows the approval by the Senate several months ago of the enabling legislation, and to follow the enabling legislation, I would move the recommendation that appears on page 82 and thereafter for certificates in engineering.
Is there a second? Second. All those approving, is there any discussion? All those approving these certificates, please say aye. All those opposed? I would now recognize Professor Kaplan on the alternative method of satisfying the English requirement. This occurs on page... Well, Professor Kaplan, would you mention the page?
Page 10 of the appendix. After consultation, Mr. Chairman, with the departments directly concerned, the Executive Committee recommended to the Faculty of the College of Letters and Science that a slight change be made in the wording of the graduation requirement in English composition in order to provide the option for the Executive Committee to approve an equivalent, other than the course English 1. That recommendation went to the Faculty of the College of Letters and Science and was approved by the Faculty of the College of Letters and Science. It is a graduation requirement which affects only students within the College of Letters and Science. I move the amended wording of Senate Regulation A458.111.d.
There's been a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of this amendment, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. I believe the ayes have it. Now, as I had suggested, that when I finished these, I would then turn, as an order of business, to that of the Regent's action, And at this time, I would recognize Professor Thorsleff, who wishes to present something for the Committee on Academic Freedom.
First, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a 30-second announcement, if I could. I would like to announce that the Academic Freedom Committee has taken notice of the direction of the Senate at its last meeting to investigate the nature and extent of the infiltration of the campus and classrooms by agents of the Los Angeles Police. We feel sure enough of the moral aspects of the matter. Such action is surely in violation of the academic freedom of both students and professors, but we feel more time is needed to investigate the legal aspects. We would therefore like to announce that next week the committee will be holding hearings on the nature and extent of such infiltration, and we would like at this time to invite any faculty member or student to submit in writing to the committee by this Friday at the Academic Senate offices any information he may have on the matter. And correspondence would please include telephone numbers so that they can be reached and possibly invited to appear at our hearings. The Academic Freedom Committee met in emergency session this morning and proposed...
Just a minute. Point of what? Yes.
We're not playing television exclusively.
Oh.
Okay. I have no objection.
Thank you.
The Academic Freedom Committee met in emergency session this morning and proposes the following resolution to the Academic Senate. Whereas the Board of Regents' action on May 15, 1970, in removing the status of Professor Angela Davis from the jurisdiction of the President and the Chancellor is a statement to all faculty members that their continued employment is subject to arbitrary termination on the basis of their political beliefs without regard to their academic performance. Therefore, be it resolved by the Los Angeles Division of the Academic Senate that A, we reject this action as a lawless and irresponsible usurpation of the rights of the administrative officers and faculty of the university, and a breach of the Regent's obligations to the people of the state and to the university to maintain this institution as a place of free inquiry. B, we are outraged that at a time of national unrest and division, the guardians of this university, sworn to uphold order and law as well as the ideals of the university, would further inflame the atmosphere by such a deliberate and unwarranted provocation. C, we direct the officers of the Senate to request the American Association of University Professors to initiate an investigation of the Regent's action with a view to censure. D, we direct the officers of the Senate to appoint a special emergency action committee which will, in consultation with the Academic Council and the statewide assembly, investigate and initiate every possible legal, financial, and moral means of action open to the Senate to forestall or to circumvent a regental decision at their June meeting to terminate Professor Davis's appointment, and to report and recommend such actions at an emergency meeting of the Senate to be convened at the chairman's discretion before the close of the academic year.
Is there a second to that? Professor Wilson.
I would, as a matter of information for the Senate in connection with the same problem which seems to be on the floor, I would like to notify you all that there is a petition being circulated through the faculty, which it is hoped an overwhelming majority will sign with their names and departments, a petition which will be delivered to the regents, amongst others, to demonstrate not only that the Senate, in its infinite anonymity, has voted to issue its 375th serious warning to the regents, but we mean it this time. The petition reads, and I'm not moving this as a motion, but merely for information, we, the undersigned members of the UCLA faculty, protest the recent unprecedented action of the Board of Regents in summarily suspending the powers of administrative officers and intruding upon the process of evaluation of academic qualifications by peers, which is essential to a great university. We call upon the Regents to withdraw from a course so fraught with peril for the future of this university. I hope that you will all sign this petition as it appears before your face. I hope we'll be able to get it around the campus within a day or two. We hope to get as many as 1,500 signatures on this petition before the end of the week or before early next week.
Professor Summers.
Harold Summers, Economics. I'm in favor of the resolution read and also the action of the committee that preceded it. I think, though, there's something that should precede all of this, and that is a complete, total, and unequivocal vote of confidence in Chancellor Young. And I suggest that we do that before we do anything else.
I'm afraid we have a motion on the floor at this time. I recognize somebody down here, Professor King. We're speaking now to the motion of the Academic Freedom Committee.
I agree that a person's political opinion should not be taken into account when he is up for hiring or promotion. I take this stand because I think politics should be kept out completely from the university. But we have to be consistent. If we want the regents to consider only a person's competence as a scholar and teacher, not his political background, when appointing him as a professor, then we as professors should devote ourselves only to teaching and research in our special field of competence. What we do in our spare time outside the classroom is our business, of course. But we do not have the right to indoctrinate our students ex cathedra in politics at the taxpayer's expense. Last week, this Senate passed some clearly political resolutions. Among other things, it was resolved that a professor should be allowed to devote part or all of his teaching time this quarter to political discussions with students instead of to regular classwork. He is assumed to get his regular salary for this activity. If we politicize the university in this way, we have no right to criticize the regents for their ruling on Angela Davis. If we professors are allowed to use class time, if professors are allowed to use their class time and their authority as professors for making political propaganda, it's in my mind perfectly legitimate that the people of California, through their representatives, the regents, check all professors' political background before hiring them and paying them for political guidance of their children. We have to make up our minds. Either we want this academic community to remain neutral and unpolitical, devoted only to relevant or irrelevant teaching and research.
Yes,
Then we are on safe ground when fighting.
He is addressing himself to the motion right now.
Can I speak? Please speak. We have to make up our minds. Either we want this academic community to remain neutral and unpolitical, devoted only to relevant or irrelevant teaching and research. Then we are on safe ground when fighting political firing and hiring of colleagues. Or UCLA will cease to be a center for higher learning and research, and will turn to a political battleground for extremists from the right and the left. Tertium non datur. That is, we cannot use the university as a sanctuary from which we safely can carry out political action while being paid for doing other things.
I would like to read once more, so we can read once more the resolution of the Committee on Academic Freedom, so that we may restrict our discussion to that motion. The Academic Freedom Committee proposes the following resolution to the Academic Senate. Whereas the Board of Regents' actions on May 15, 1970, in removing the status of Professor Angela Davis from the jurisdiction of the President and the Chancellor is a statement to all faculty members that their continued employment is subject to arbitrary termination on the basis of their political beliefs without regard to their academic performance. Therefore, be it resolved by the Los Angeles Division of the Academic Senate that A, we reject this action as a lawless and irresponsible usurpation of the rights of the administrative officers and faculty of the university and a breach of the Regent's obligation to the people of the state and to the university to maintain this institution as a place for free inquiry. B, we are outraged that at a time of national unrest and division, the guardians of this university, sworn to uphold order and law as well as the ideals of the university, would further inflame the atmosphere by such a deliberate and unwarranted provocation. C, we direct the officer of the Senate to request the American Association of University Professors to initiate an investigation of the Regent's action with a view to censure. D, we direct the officer of the Senate to appoint a special emergency action committee which will, in consultation with the Academic Council and statewide assembly, investigate and initiate every possible legal, financial, and moral means of action open to the Senate to forestall or to circumvent a regental decision at their June meeting to terminate Professor Davis' appointment, and to report and recommend such actions at an emergency meeting of the Senate to be convened at the chairman's discretion before the close of the academic year. Is there any further discussion on this motion by the Committee on Academic Freedom? I read it to be sure that all of you have in mind what it says.
My name is John Gleason from the Classics Department. I agree in general with the resolution as read, but it seems to me that the language is a bit extreme. If it's lawless, it would not be done. The action is just as legal as it is for the United States government to take over the registration of voters in the South. So that in the interest of presenting a resolution which is not extreme in its own language or in its anger, I move as an amendment that the word lawless be deleted.
Wait a minute. We reject this action. I understand that the amendment you're asking for is the deletion of the word lawless.
Yes.
So that it would read, we reject this action as an irresponsible usurpation of the rights.
Yes.
Is there a second to the amendment?
I'd like to speak against the amendment. It's unfortunately one of the well-known principles of deontic logic that it does not hold that what is obligatory is true. It also does not hold that what is required by law is always done. Hopefully, what is required by law will eventually be done. The Regents acted in a lawless way in attempting to fire Professor Davis solely on the basis of her membership in the Communist Party. That was indeed an unlawful act, and the courts have indicated that. I think they have again acted unlawfully. I hope that the courts will so indicate.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? Professor Nash.
Well, further clarification, please, David. What is unlawful about what they have done? They have not fired Professor Davis. I'm just trying to clear up in my own mind. Is the unlawful act, the lawless act, the taking back of this power over non-tenured faculty?
I think the question should be addressed to Professor Thorson.
Please. Professor Thorson.
I think one would have to say, I might add, by the way, that it was the lawyer on our committee who wrote that part of the resolution. And if he is here, he could probably speak to it better than I could. I think one would have to say something like this, that since their action in taking back their authority in this case was quite evidently based solely on Professor Davis's membership in the Communist Party, that was an improper basis for their taking back their veto power over the appointment.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Professor Ladies.
I think there's something here that disturbs us all very much, which transcends the Angela Davis case per se, and it is in effect the revocation of the privilege of the campus to be the ultimate arbiter in the matter of at least of untenured positions. Now, this has been a delegation, and what's being offered to us now is something which I have heard called the principal agent theory. That is to say, it is conceived that the delegator at any time is free to assume the ultimate obligation, whether the power has been delegated or not. I think this is highly improper, and that's what regental resolutions are all about, let alone bylaws and other laws. And it seems to me that the regents have an obligation at the very least, distasteful as it might be, to overtly revoke their own regulation that the powers to act in non-tenured matters are in fact relegated to the campuses and their chancellors. So I think in this connection, as if we might focus our attention on what I will call internal law, it is indeed unlawful, and I would hope that as we complain about it, and I think it will take this form, we keep the Angela Davis case in mind, to be sure, and in fact perhaps center our attention on it. But it does represent an abuse which is more general, the abuse of removing from the faculty its privileges which were delegated and hopefully will not only be left with us, but expanded to return all academic appointment matters to our own campuses and chancellors.
Professor Matthews.
While I am generally sympathetic to Professor Thorsleb's resolution, there are some facts in the matter that we need to get straight. First, the regents have not yet fired Miss Davis. All they have done is to reject Chancellor Young's recommendation. They have not made up their minds as yet, as I understand. But this is perfectly true. According to their paper, the statements in the papers this morning, they are all going to read carefully through the evidence to see whether the committee was justified in coming to the conclusion that it did. What Professor Thorsleb is doing is prejudging the regents.
The amendment for discussion. To the amendment.
About the amendment to remove the word lawless, I believe. The question is, of course, wider and in one sense simpler. When I was hired, I was given a description of the way academic freedom was maintained at the University of California, and I signed a contract with the understanding of those processes. The last speaker, I respectfully point out, misses the point. While I am deeply disturbed about the particular implications of Ms. Davis's possible dismissal, and I'm concerned about the implications of not only political but racial repression, I can speak directly to the amendment and the main motion by saying that as far as I am concerned, the violation of those principles of academic freedom that I was told existed here in the case of one person violates the principles of academic freedom that concern me.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? The secretary acting for me has asked you to identify yourself.
Fred Abraham, Department of Psychiatry. I'd like to say that it's not a question of whether they're just usurping authority. They indeed did fire her this Friday. They fired her and they've just tried to delay it time-wise at a point where they think it would create less of a fuss on campus. I also agree with the last speaker and not David Kaplan. I think there is a racial issue involved and it's trying to hide it behind another real issue. And thirdly, the regents last summer, I believe, made some kind of statement or ruling that political matters would not be involved in the hiring or firing of faculty, and they then proceeded immediately to violate that agreement and have done so again this weekend.
If there's no further discussion on the amendment, are you ready for the question? I will read it. That is, the original statement read, "We reject this action as a lawless and irresponsible usurpation." It will read, if amended, it will read, "We reject this action as an irresponsible usurpation." All those in favor of the amendment, please stand up. All those opposed to the amendment. The amendment carries. Oh, wait a minute, excuse me. The amendment does not carry. And we're back to the original statement of the Committee on Academic Freedom. Is there further discussion on the statement? Professor Firth.
I'm Montgomery Firth in the Philosophy Department. I was unsure whether to speak to the amendment or to the motion, but what I would like to do is to read a short paragraph from a statement that has been issued this afternoon by David Kaplan and myself, by Kaplan as acting chairman of the department this quarter, and myself as chairman designate of the department for next year. It reads, "We must understand the cynicism of the Regent's use of the Angela Davis case. By playing upon the public's fear of communism, and the faculty's legitimate preoccupation with the principle of freedom of association, the regents have succeeded in clouding their basic objective: the disruption of the university by political interference with its faculty appointments, its academic programs, and its relevance to the vital issues of our time. To them, the question whether a communist teaches at UCLA for another year is secondary. They would accept it as long as their primary object was accomplished, their usurpation of these critical academic functions within the university. That is the issue. As her friends and colleagues, we will continue to resist these illegal attempts to interfere with Angela Davis's reappointment. In itself and in its significance, her non-reappointment would be a calamity. But the fact must be faced that whether she is finally reappointed for next year or not, and the latter is unacceptable, the basic usurpation of academic authority has already occurred. Its immediate reversal is imperative, and we call upon the Chancellor, the faculty, and the people of California to save their university by bringing it about. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Will Professor Hirschberger, would you like?
Perhaps instead of speaking about the Regent's cynicism, we could also look at our own cynicism. I believe that we, the Senate, has conducted itself in a fashion to develop a serious credibility gap. We act without complete information, we act emotionally. And we need to merely look at the records of the Senate in the last year or so to find this to be the case. And I wonder whether we're too immature to realize that if we act as a political pressure group, that we are opening ourselves to the reprisals that go with acting as a political pressure group. Thank you.
I would like to admonish the observers in the galleries to please restrain your displays. I have had a complaint, and it is a personal privilege of the academic Senate member to make this complaint. So please be as quiet as possible. Professor Gons? We may avoid this if I see if there's no one else wants to speak. Is there anyone else who wants to speak to the motion? The previous question has been called for, so we'll have to ask for that.
I was up before the previous question was ready. I've been standing for 2 minutes, please.
I'm sorry, but I had recognized Professor Gons.
Mr. Chairman, if you had only looked this way, you would have seen me standing 2 minutes before he was up.
Professor Gons, would you withdraw your motion so the gentleman may speak? The seconder withdraw it. Thank you. Will you identify yourself, please?
Professor Martinez of the History Department. I would like to speak, if I may, in favor of the resolution. And to start out by answering, at least in part, one of the previous speakers, I resent, and many of us here, I hope, resent, not only the allegation, but the explicit statement that we are politicizing the university and that somehow this started with us. And that the regents in this area are no better than Johnnies come lately. It is not true that this campus or any major campus in this country since the war has been apolitical or non-political. Let me give you only one example of this. When 4 summers ago on this campus there was a summer seminar run by one of our science departments, which brought for several weeks a number of young scientists and military men from different parts of the United States, and those seminars were held on this campus with guards standing at the doorways, and black shades drawn over the windows so that no one in the buildings beside could look in to see what was going on with telescopes or anything else. And it was perfectly clear that there were men on this campus who were involved up to their clavicles in in war-related research which was directly and explicitly war-related. This, it seems to me, was political, and there were no voices raised about it at that time. One other distinction. It does seem to me that having political discussions which include all sides of the spectrum in classroom, and indeed encouraging this, is one thing. Deliberately and explicitly radicalizing the students is something else. And as far as that goes, I suspect that that will happen anyway, whatever we as professors do. So let's not talk about our having politicized the university or doing that now, because that has gone on for at least a generation. And if anything, what we would like to do now is to politicize things the other way, to sort of roll things back and re-find once again our morality, the morality that we had lost as professors and researchers during the past generation. Thank you.
If there's no further question, if there's no further speakers, well, I'll call for the question. The question being the Academic Freedom Committee's resolution to the Senate. Do you wish me to read it again? All those in favor of the Academic Freedom Committee, please rise. I think we should have a vote on this. I would like to have the vote counted. Members of the Academic Senate voted. Tellers, would please count. All right. May be seated. All those opposed to the Academic Freedom Committee's resolution. Those in favor of the motion, 209. Those opposed, 5. I believe that Professor Dean Summers was making a statement, and I said I would return to recognize him at the appropriate time. I think this is it. I will recognize him as having the floor.
Since the chairman has let something slip, I should say that my association with the administration ends June 30th. I hope that restores my credibility. I don't know if you all realize what the Chancellor has gone through in the last few months. I think it's extremely important, in order to encourage the regents, if there's still time, to restore the authority to make appointments to this campus, to assure them that the suggestions that some of them have let slip and have been picked up in the press, that maybe there are some doubts about the activities and position of the Chancellor, that we dispel all such false notions. Therefore, I move a vote of confidence in Chancellor Young.
Professor King.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to table the motion for the following reasons.
Mr. Chairman, a vote to table isn't debatable or reasonable.
In such case, I would...
Mr. Chairman, a point of order.
Yes.
A vote to table has to be voted on right away, and no reasons can be given.
This is correct.
He hasn't moved.
Let me modify the vote to table to a vote of opposition, and I will explain my reason for opposing the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I think he's wrong. I think that a vote to table is indeed debatable when there's a motion before the House.
No, it's not.
In such event, I will explain my reason for opposing the motion, although I regret that circumstances are such that I cannot vote to table. I would like to oppose the motion for the simple reason that I think first Chancellor Young should be given the opportunity to respond to the contention of Regent Norton Simon, as reported in the Los Angeles Times today, that the Chancellor assured the Board of Regents 4 or 5 months ago that Professor Angela Davis would be fired. Regent Simon emphasized the discrepancy between the Chancellor's assurance then and his recent statement to rehire her before the Board of Regents. This is a discrepancy which I submit needs clarification before a vote of confidence be given.
Professor Popper.
Those of you who heard, listened to Popper in Astronomy, those of you who heard Chancellor Young's press conference at 11:30 this morning will know that he did clarify this point. He flatly declared that he called Regent Simon, I'm not quoting, I'm relating what I heard, some of you perhaps can do better, told him that he had been misquoted in the press, and as a matter of fact, he had made no such statement.
Yes, the gentleman there.
Dr. West, the Department of Psychiatry. I think it's important for us as a faculty to appreciate the fact that there is no way that we can, as a town meeting or as a group of 200 here today or in any other grouping or arrangement, represent our faculty and our campus in relationship to the regents and the public. We're very fortunate that we have a chancellor who has proved his ability to do that, who has shown the courage to stand up and be counted when it was difficult, and who has expressed, I think, pretty generally what most of us have felt and done it well. I think that we owe him a vote of confidence, and I'd like to ask for support of the motion.
Professor Washington.
Yes, I'm opposed to the motion because I don't have any confidence in the Chancellor. I don't have any confidence in him in the first place because he didn't sign Angela Davis's reappointment form, which he should have done. Then I would have had confidence in him. I don't have any confidence in him in the second place because if the report in the Los Angeles Times is correct, the Chancellor characterized the actions of this Senate last week in the decisions that it made on ROTC. He characterized that as more irresponsible than anything that the regents have done. Now, if the Chancellor said that, I submit nobody in his right mind ought to have any confidence in him. But the third and most basic reason why I don't have any confidence in the Chancellor anymore is because I think the Chancellor is going to become, if he is not already, a very pernicious force on this campus, because I think he has managed to persuade himself that he is the sole knight in shining armor, the sole bridge over troubled water, and he will continue to give up every right that this faculty has and every legitimate interest that this university has in the name of saving it from some worse chancellor. If the chancellor deserves our confidence, it would be because he stood up and said to the regents, as he has not yet done, these are the things I believe in, these are the things I will do, and if you won't have me under these conditions, then fire me. But he won't do that.
Quiet. Order, please. Order. Order. Professor Kaufman.
As the mover of this motion must have realized if he thought about it, he has opened a Pandora's box on an issue which distracts us from our central purpose here today, and I move to table.
All those in favor of tabling, say aye. Aye. All those opposed to tabling? No. The motion is tabled. Is there anyone further? Professor Morris.
I drafted a resolution, Mr. Chairman, and I wonder if it's available to members of the Senate. If not, I would be pleased to, or at least willing to, read it. Shall I read it?
Yeah, please.
Professor Angela Davis's qualifications and conduct have been scrutinized, dissected, and evaluated by an extraordinarily expensive, elaborate, exhaustive review process. The conclusions of all those within the faculty and administration who have reviewed the case, applying rational and legally accepted criteria of evaluation, has been that there is no valid reason for failing to reappoint and compelling reason to reappoint. Should the Board of Regents, despite this case for reappointment, dismiss Professor Davis, there would be a blatant affront to the principles of legality and morality and to the principles of academic freedom and faculty autonomy. Where arbitrariness is the order of the day, is there a place for any man to hide? Where those charged with administering the law disregard it and show it disrespect, is there any hope? Should the Board of Regents dismiss Professor Davis, their action would be unacceptable to any person dedicated to principles that make a university a place, an idea, worthy of veneration. As it would be unacceptable, we hereby express our unwavering determination not to accept it. Therefore, the Academic Senate of the University of California, Los Angeles is a corporate body dedicated to preserving the university and the values it incorporates, expresses its intention, in the event of the Regents not approving of the Chancellor's recommendation for Professor Davis's reappointment, to guarantee that the university meet its obligations to Professor Davis and its students by assuring the following. First, that Professor Angela Davis receive for the coming academic year the full salary to which she is entitled. Second, that arrangements be made for Professor Davis to teach at a regular time and place on the UCLA campus. And third, that appropriate steps be taken to provide regular academic credit for the courses which she shall teach. With our goal, the prevention of injustice and the infringement of the integrity of the university, we further provide, in order to implement these decisions, that the following committees be established. A committee to arrange for the provision of Professor Davis's salary. B, a committee to develop the mechanics of credit for Professor Davis's courses. And C, a legal committee to investigate the possibility of holding personally liable for damages each regent voting for dismissal for ultra-virus acts occasioning the necessary assumption of financial obligations by the Academic Senate. We further urge upon our legally trained colleagues to press forward upon the legal front. We finally and solemnly express our shock, our dismay, our rage that those charged with the governance of the university should at any time make an issue of a teacher's political persuasion and speeches. But particularly do we feel this when the time chosen is one in which the very life of our institutions is at stake, where we all confront problems of monumental difficulty, and where, if we do not unify to solve them, life as we value it may no longer be known.
Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, may I say
Professor
a
Morris,
word-
I assume
word
you
to
may
this?
wish to speak to it.
Yeah. This is not, it seems to me, a very significant resolution to pass. It's important, I think, to do at least this, but I think that previous speakers have pointed out that the problem is of larger dimensions, and this resolution does not address itself to those dimensions. The retention of faculty authority over appointments seems to me the crucial issue, and I think we must address ourselves to that issue. Nevertheless, I think it's important that we see to it that something that I regard as unacceptable, and I think others may feel as I do, that we simply not accept it. In the petition which is circulating, and which I certainly find myself prepared and eager to sign, there is a line to the effect that if we are silent, we are accomplices in the wrong. And I think there is truth in that. But it doesn't follow that if we speak out, we cease to be accomplices. If we have an opportunity of preventing the robbery of a bank, if we remain silent and don't protest, to be sure we may be regarded as accomplices. But if we protest and protest vigorously and nevertheless stand by, we are nevertheless accomplices. And I think that we must, at some point, as I said last October, I believe, we must at some point put some teeth in our expression of convictions, because we will cease to be sure whether they are in fact our convictions if we aren't prepared to put ourselves on the line, at least in a minimal way. And that's all that this resolution really calls for. So I submit it for approval.
Are there others who wish to speak to this? No, I recognize somebody over here.
Wolfenstein Political Science. I want to speak in favor of the motion. In the midst of Angela Davis as issue on this campus, one of the things that hasn't been paid much attention to is Angela Davis as individual. And one of the things that's awfully gratifying about this particular motion is that, in fact, Angela's well-being is being, in some sense, provided for in this particular motion. It's rather difficult late in the year to change plans sufficiently to leave one area to go to another, and this would preclude that particular necessity, especially given the kind of surveillance that Angela's political activities as well as her non-political activities have been under, that she has been under for the past year or so. It seems to me the least we could do to provide her with a means for survival.
Professor Nash.
I wholly support Nash in history. I wholly support the resolution introduced by Professor Morris, and I would like to offer simply a friendly amendment to insert after the words full salary in item 1 of the resolution the words and benefits. So it will read that Professor Angela Davis receive for the coming academic year the full salary and benefits to which she is entitled.
There is an amendment suggested. Professor Morris?
I certainly accept
You accept the amendment? Does it, well, it takes more than just you accepting it. The entire assembly has to. All those in favor of the amendment? Those opposed? So this amendment then should, the second line in number 1 should read the full salary and benefits. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to the Professor Gons?
Well, I fully support the idea behind this motion. I would like to propose an amendment which I suppose could be considered friendly. In any case, I would like to propose that those monies to be found by the committee for the support of Professor Angela Davis in the next year be taken where, if at all possible, for monies already appropriated to the activities of the Academic Senate. The point of this amendment which I haven't written out, but which can be worked out. The point of this amendment is that this should not be a charitable operation based on faculty contributions to Professor Davis. Rather, if the Academic Senate values its honor, if we do vote for such a resolution as has just been proposed, the Senate should fund Miss Davis's salary from its own appropriations, and therefore essentially from the taxpayers' money, and not from our money as charitable contributors.
I would like to reply to Professor Gons that I believe this is impossible for the Academic Senate Office to do that. Because the funds which are allocated to the Academic Senate Office are funds coming from the regents, and I don't think that this would be possible, and they would simply withdraw all the funds.
Well, I would suggest in any case that the committee appointed to assure Professor Davis's salary for the next year be directed to look into this matter very seriously. Since after all, in this motion we're taking essentially a revolutionary or a radical action. We're not following the orders of the regents by reappointing Professor Davis by assuring that she gets credit. And if we're willing to rebel against the regents to this extent, I see no reason why we can't rebel against them, or at least attempt to a further extent.
I'm afraid not.
I'd like to speak in favor of the amendment and simply point out that the chairman could correct me if I'm wrong. But since all operations of the Academic Senate are paid for and funded by the Board of Regents, the very paper on which this resolution will be printed and distributed will be paper paid for by the Board of Regents. It seems to be not illogical, then, that we direct the committee who will find ways to implement paying Professor Davis's salary to also find ways to pay for that salary out of Academic Senate funds.
I'm afraid that this would be impossible.
Mr. Chairman, when the Academic Senate directs a committee to find ways to do something, it cannot direct that committee to find ways to do something and at the same time say that it is impossible to find those ways to do it.
I think well, I can't join in the discussion. Professor Savage.
A suggestion. You, Professor Page, are a member of the Academic Senate and its chairman.
Yes.
The Academic Senate is considering taking an action here. I strongly suggest, sir, that you let the regents tell us that it's impossible, and that none of us tell ourselves that it is impossible.
That Angela Davis does indeed have a financial basis for staying here another year. If we limit the committee to find a way to get money from the regents, and the committee is then unable and finds that indeed it is impossible, then we are no longer able to guarantee Professor Davis her status at the university, or at least the means to stay here. Therefore, I think we should vote down this amendment and leave the committee the freedom to find this money from the regents if it can, or from us or any other way if it cannot.
Point of information, the words "if at all possible" were included in my statement of the amendment. In other words, if it's not possible, then we find some other.
I would like to know exactly where your amendment is written into this.
We have the wording of the amendment?
I'm trying to get it now.
Not exactly where. It should go with the committee on this. It should go after the part of the motion which says that the committee shall be formed to assure Professor Davis's salary. I think that was Committee A.
Committee A said, under A, this is supposed to be under Committee A. A committee to arrange for the provision of Professor Davis's salary, and then this would be the second sentence. well, it says here, the committee whose charge is, well, this would be after A, B, and C, would read, the committee whose charge is to seek funds for the payment of Professor Davis' salary is directed to find, if at all possible, funds already appropriated by the Regents to the Academic Senate. Professor Kerr.
Kerr, Political Science. Mr. Chairman, I am sympathetic to what I believe to be the intent of this resolution, and I would like to vote for it, but in order to ensure that I can do so in good conscience, I should like to ask its mover to clarify a few points, which I suspect others may find useful for clarification also. First of all, would Professor Morris, or perhaps anyone else, be able to tell us a few words about how they would visualize the mechanics of points 1, 2, and 3? What would be the track that is had in mind under which arrangements could be made for her to teach and for course credit to be awarded? And secondly, I would like to ask any of our lawyers, perhaps Professor Morris, if he could also say some words about the legal outlook if and when Ms. Davis contests the Regent's decision a month hence in court. Is there any presumption or likelihood that an injunction may be obtained, for example, which would in fact give her early relief from this injustice?
We do have the amendment before the House. I think that these questions went beyond this particular amendment. I'd like to clear this off the books first, and then I will ask Professor Morris to answer your question. All those in, is there any more discussion of the amendment? Yes, Professor.
Gerstein, Political Science. I'm opposed to the amendment. First of all, because it seems to me it involves, my impression from Chairman Page is that it would involve placing upon a few members of the Senate a terribly heavy burden and placing them in line for some serious sanctions that the rest of us would not participate in. In principle, I don't think that's the right way to do things. I think it would be, in fact, quite healthy for all of us to make some sacrifice, each of us, for this purpose, and that's my understanding of the resolution as it stands. I would secondly think it's very important to deny this notion that it would be charity if we all contributed. If we all contribute, we contribute to keeping this university a university, and that's something that's for all of us and not just for Professor Davis.
Professor Savage.
To Professor Gerstein's point, I think he's right. I think that if this motion passes, it will place unusual stress on certain officers of the Academic Senate. There have been a number of stress positions throughout the crisis involving Angela Davis. In the early stage, the stress position was the Philosophy Department. Later times, the stress stage was with the Academic Senate. When the Regents perform an action like that they have performed, and we take it seriously, we feel stress throughout the entire system. Our officers, whom we elected, who are supposed to represent us, will feel stress. But since they are our officers and our representatives, if we move to pass this motion, then it is their obligation to withstand that stress.
All those in favor of the amendment? This is the amendment, remember. We're on the amendment. The committee whose charge is to seek funds for the payment of Professor Davis' salary is directed to find, if at all possible, funds already appropriated by the Regents to the Academic Senate. All those in favor of this amendment, please stand. All those opposed to this amendment, please stand. The amendment loses. The question is now called for. I would like Professor Saxton. Now on the main. Yes, you may. Yes, you may.
Couldn't Professor Kerr's questions be answered?
Oh, yes. Excuse me. Would you permit Professor Kerr's questions to be answered first? I will recognize you immediately afterwards. Professor Morris, I believe Professor Kerr had 3 questions that he.
I caught 2. Let me see if I can respond to the first Where are you, Malcolm? Oh, there. Very briefly and as honestly as I can. In drafting this resolution, I had in mind a goal that I believe that it was essential that we seek to achieve, and I had a very vague idea as to how we would go about achieving that goal. I know so little about the regulations governing credit and accreditation that I didn't have at all clearly in mind a variety of possible routes. But what I was certain about was that the ingenuity and intelligence of the faculty, perhaps combined with the assistance of the administration, which it seems to me should be available, we would figure out a way of, in fact, getting credit for the course. And I hadn't thought through the mechanics either of how the salary was to be provided, but I was once again certain that some way could be found. So in answer to your question, I didn't have in mind any definite routes, but I trusted that a committee would in fact come up with some that would be realistic. I didn't think that this was just an empty gesture. I certainly would not have proposed it. I'd like to have Professor Horowitz respond to the inquiry about the legal situation. But did you want to pose another question?
I thought perhaps somebody else would answer the first part of the question if Professor Morris doesn't feel able to do so.
Well, could you repeat the first part of the question?
Will I come up, Mr. Chairman?
Come on.
Mr. Chairman, let me assure you and everyone here that it's by no means my intention to bog us down in irrelevancies. I feel somewhat unhappy, in fact quite unhappy, with the fact that we are, by the language of this resolution, undertaking to guarantee certain things, and I would simply like to have some notion that there's a plausible way to do it. I suspect there may be, and Professor Morris suspects so too, but it seems to me a little bit quick on the trigger for us to make guarantees and then find that we have no idea how to do it. So there may be some procedural specialists in this body who could say something a bit more substantial about how we would guarantee that arrangements be made that she teach courses and that students receive credit for it. I'm very uncertain as to whether it could or would ever happen. I hope it would.
Is there anyone that wants to make a stab at this? I can make a stab at an extreme way of doing it. I'm not sure that I favor it, but it seems to me that the faculty could enter into a cooperative endeavor with Professor Davis whereby they agree to give special studies or individual research credit to any student enrolled in her course, and they simply validate her judgment as to the students taking the course and passing it. Now, that's off the top of my head, and I can't believe that individuals who know this game a lot better than I do can't figure out a way of doing this. I just feel it's unrealistic to suppose we can't come up with something.
Professor Saxton, and then...
Saxton, History Department. In the first resolution that was adopted, we set up a committee to explore and put into effect ways of reversing the decision that the regents have made or are obviously going to make. We don't know precisely what the means that committee will discover will be, or even whether they will be effective. In this motion, we're proposing setting up a committee to explore means to accomplish some other things. We don't know precisely, and we don't need to figure out here precisely what those details will be. What I am interested in is a guarantee of a different sort, and that is that the Academic Senate here takes a stand on the question of this issue, academic freedom. I personally feel that I have been implicated by the action of the regents and the inaction of the chancellor in an action which I regard as immoral, as a violation of academic freedom, and as a violation of professional ethics. And I want to see the Senate, of which I am a member, take a stand to right that wrong. Now, the question has been raised about how will the money be raised. I would have voted for this motion whether or not it had the amendment attached to it about where the money came from. I think there will be no great problem about the money. I think the money can be raised from us if need be, and I'm willing to do it. And I would join with any 20 or any 10 faculty members to contribute the necessary salary next year for Angela Davis to continue to teach here. And I do support this motion strongly and with all my heart.
Professor Sharwat.
Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding that the Senate has appointed a committee called the Committee on Undergraduate Courses and Curricula, which alone has full authority to accreditate courses. I think that in connection with another resolution, you will find that on the addendum distributed at this meeting quotations from this authority. The committee responds to the Senate, and I believe it will respond to the sense of the Senate. As to my knowledge, there is no regulation which prohibits anyone from teaching a course. The regulations are purely administrative. I'm sure these can be met. It is the sense of the Senate which governs whether we will allow somebody to teach our students or not.
Question's been asked for. Are you ready for the question? Yeah. All those in favor of the circulated resolution by Professor Morris, please stand up. Will the tellers please count, please? The tellers please count.
This is going to die.
This is, oh yeah, this is.
Sections 6 and 7, 44.
You got them all? All right. All those opposed, please rise.
One vote. Carries 5.
The vote on the Morris resolution was 186 yes, no 4. At this stage, according to what I had suggested in the order of the business, we would now return to the normal order of the agenda, which was actually circulated to this meeting.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes?
I'm Arthur Rosette, a member of the Academic Freedom Committee,
Right.
which is a standing committee which has a further resolution to report to this meeting, and I know that the chair has ruled that the regular agenda was suspended solely for the purpose of the Angela Davis motions. The additional motion relates to the Jackson State matter, which is a matter of great moment and current importance, and since this apparently is to be the last meeting of this academic year for the Senate, may I have a ruling from the chair as to whether it will be in order during the course of this meeting to present this report of the Standing Committee to the Senate?
I would ask the House, all those in favor of changing the order of the agenda, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it, necessary two-thirds. You may present. This is from the Committee on Academic Freedom.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This morning, the Committee on Academic Freedom, in addition to meeting on the Angela Davis matter and meeting on the undercover agents on campus matter, also considered the problem of, we had a busy meeting this morning, also considered the matter of Jackson State and reports to the Divisional Senate the following resolution, which I might mention is a resolution originally adopted by the Berkeley Senate Committee on Senate Policy yesterday, May 17, 1970. And I quote, "Men of conscience must react with shock and horror to the killings by law enforcement officials of students at Jackson State College on May 14. Coming immediately after the student killings at Kent State University by National Guardsmen, the tragedy has ominous implications for our national future. The use of firearms to deal with disorders on our campuses represents a portentous escalation of violence, not only because human lives are at stake, but also because the escalation comes from the side sworn to uphold law and the values that exist to further. The law, and those who administer the law, are, as Justice Brandeis reminded us, the potent, omnipresent teachers. We must start there if we are ever to arrest this insane cycle of self-destruction. We call upon our political leaders and upon law enforcement officials as a first step, promptly and decisively to repudiate the use of deadly force in dealing with disturbances on the campuses of this country." Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the committee, I would move that resolution.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion by the Committee on Academic Freedom, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed. Now, at this time,
Mr. Chairman, may I ask, I know that you're trying to return to the agenda, but I will.
No.
I want to request one. I want to request one further departure from the agenda. A very large number of young people on this campus have been working very hard on a petition which is calling for something which is embodied in the resolution. It's not on a page. It's the resolution that has to do with the altering of the university calendar so that students can work in the political elections next November, and I would request that the order of business be changed so this can be introduced now.
all those in favor of changing this order of business? Aye. Those opposed? Professor Kaufman.
The resolution reads, "Whereas working within the political system of this country provides a most important means of realizing the ends that bring us together during this period of national crisis, be it therefore resolved that the Los Angeles Division of the Academic Senate urges the President of the University to arrange a fall calendar that will, for a period of 2 weeks prior to the November elections, enable students to work for political candidates of their choice in a peaceful and democratic manner and without suffering academic penalty." Now, I should like to point out first...
1 minute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
1 minute. Thank you. The floor of the Assembly now has the motion.
I should like to point out first that the resolution does not prescribe particular form in which the intent of it should be realized. It calls on the president of the university, who is the appropriate authority, to work that out. May be done by changing the calendar, extending it, starting early, or whatever, or simply recessing for 2 weeks. But that is left up to the president to work out in his wisdom. I should like, in my remarks, I might say there have been a number of students working for the last 2 or 3 days getting signatures on petitions. We don't have a current count, but I think it's well over a few thousand at this point, supporting the intent of this resolution. I should like in my remarks to address myself specifically to the arguments of Professor Lipsuk, is it? Earlier in the day, because I don't suppose it's a great secret to anyone here that part of my motivation in supporting this resolution is to see to it that hundreds of thousands and hopefully millions of young people are working the precincts of this country in the fall so as to bring the rotten war in Vietnam to an end. And obviously, the Los Angeles Times, as it is so quick to do, and now Professor Lipsuk, has called to our attention that there is a central issue of principle involved here, namely, should the academic senate, as a corporate body, take political stands? When I read the editorial in the Los Angeles Times, I found their reasoning illogical, and I confess I found the same true earlier today. And let me say why I think it is illogical to suppose that this resolution and others like it, which we have passed and will be put forward, takes political stands in an objectionable sense. I think we can all agree that the academic senate should act on matters that impair educational excellence in a serious way. I think that is a premise on which we can all stand. Now, some of the things that impair educational excellence at a university are, unhappily, or happily as the case may be, but inevitably, political in character. There is no way, when the circumstances which impair educational excellence are political in character, to avoid taking a political stance without dodging from our fundamental responsibility of bringing educational excellence to the campus. The Angela Davis case is an academic issue, but it is surely a political issue as well, and we have just taken a stand which no one or very few would question as at least within the purview of the Senate's appropriate powers. We have taken a political stand on the Angela Davis case. Still, one might be wary of taking political stands on matters that affect educational excellence at our university because, as the LA Times was quick to point out, there are costs. The public may take umbrage and further restrict our budget. That is, there may be financial costs, or there may be a further provocation to political interference in our affairs if we take political stands. I'm fully aware of the political nature of the matrix in which the university is embedded, and it's in realization of that that, in fact, I support the resolution I've described and other resolutions. What we need, then, are criteria which enable us to take political stands, but not lightly, recognizing that there are potential costs, criteria which specify the kinds of political stands we should take out of our devotion to educational excellence at the university. And I propose the following 4 criteria as bases for taking a frankly political stand, but one which is motivated by the desire to restore educational excellence to our university. First, the source of the harm to the university should be a very great evil. Secondly, that the harm to educational excellence caused by that very great evil is pervasive and substantial. Third, that a wide consensus exists, both with respect to the evil character, the greatness of the harm, and to its having its pervasive and substantial effects on educational excellence. And fourth, that the action taken by the academic senate should have some promise of being an effective political response to something that threatens the university. And I am convinced that all of these criteria are satisfied in the case of the war in Southeast Asia. It is a very great evil. It, for 5 years, has probably caused more harm to every facet of educational life in our country than any other great evil, with the exception of racism, that exists in this country. There is, as President Hitch has pointed out, a wide consensus with respect to the greatness of the evil and its relevance to the integrity of our educational process, and I believe by coordinating our efforts with schools across the country, the action we take in recessing the schools so that our students can go out and fight against the war in a democratic and peaceful and nonviolent manner will be the most effective thing that we can do. So I submit that should the Senate not act on this and other resolutions before it, it would be acting immorally, irrationally, and above all, ineffectively in relation to the defense of higher education in our state and our nation. Thank you very much.
I will point of information. Oh, wait a minute. I recognize this gentleman here, and then I will get Rittenberg again.
Yes. would like to know if in the first resolution we passed in this series, we did not call for another meeting of this body before the termination of the quarter. Am I correct in that assumption or not? I think it's pertinent to this motion.
An emergency.
It is what?
I think it is pertinent to this motion.
The first motion was one in which was to change the order, right? Change the agenda. And I don't remember whether Professor Kaufman or not said that we could have another meeting later on. I mean, what? Here. Oh, just a minute. In Resolution 1, it is true. The one we passed said, at their meeting in June to terminate and to recommend and to report and recommend such actions at an emergency meeting of the Senate to be convened at the chairman's discretion before the close of the academic year. Yes, the answer is yes, we did pass that.
Chuck Nesbitt, Economics Department. I would like to make an amendment to the resolution. In the second paragraph, I would like to strike the words "that will," that's in the third sentence, and add, this is after the word calendar, "that recesses classes." And then I would like to add the following sentence at the end of the second paragraph. Be it understood that the academic days of the recess be added to the beginning and or the end of the presently drafted fall calendar. And I would like to explain this amendment. That as it currently stands, I support the amendment, but I think that it's...
Do you have a second to your amendment? Second. Now, the House has.
Thank you. I think that it's one thing for us to respond to a more or less instantaneous crisis, and I think it's quite something else to plan into our normal academic calendar rather unusual activities, to say the least. And I think that it's incumbent upon us and our students to be willing to bear some cost for going out and engaging in very worthwhile activities. And I'm saying that cost is to continue the normal academic calendar days that we have been accustomed to doing in the past. And we should be willing either to come early in the beginning of the year or stay on later. Now, I realize that Professor Kaufman didn't preclude that possibility in explaining his motion, his resolution, but as it presently stands unamended, it leaves open the possibility to anyone who cares to interpret it that we could be suggesting that we just dilute the normal academic year by 2 weeks. So the purpose of my amendment is to, which I consider to be basically friendly, which is to say that we will engage in, we support these activities, but still we're willing to continue the normal academic calendar days for 1 quarter.
May I have a copy of the resolution, please, of your amendment? Is there any discussion of the amendment?
I want to speak in favor of this amendment. I confess to a feeling of the same unease that I think some of my colleagues who are usually identified as more conservative than myself have about the politicizing of the university. I think this is a very difficult question, and I'm not sure I have the answer to it, but I'd just like to share a few thoughts with you. It seems to me that the phrase political activity, as it's used in the context of the present debate, is highly propagandistic. That is to say, when the regents or someone else like them want to condemn us for doing something, then they say we're engaging in political activity, and that's a way of trying to get us to stop us from doing it. Even when we respond to a threat to the integrity of our institution, an attempt to take away the power of making appointments and accrediting courses, there will be some in the state who say we're engaging in political activity. Now, if we allowed the term to be used in that way against ourselves, then of course we would be helpless. I mean, the effect of that use of the term is to say that we're not ever supposed to do anything to defend the integrity of our institution. So clearly that use of the term is propagandistic and wrong. But I think there is a correct use of the term. I think there is some distinction that we have to draw somewhere, just as there is some distinction that we have to draw somewhere between war-related research and research that's not war-related. That's a similar question. The notion of war-related research is a highly complex question. Where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line between political activity and not political activity? I'm not sure I can give an answer to that question because I think there are a whole spectrum of activities, and a confused concept. But I suggest that, with respect to this resolution, if we accept Professor Nisbet's amendment to it, then we don't have to worry about falling within the bounds of what can be called standard academic activity. I would be in favor of this resolution being adopted for every year. That is to say, I mean every election year. It seems to me that elections are extremely important. We ought to participate in them, and we ought to give our students time to participate in them if we really believe in the democratic process. And doing that probably can be compared to giving students time to participate in harvesting, which is a very important activity. So it seems to me that if we, if we adopt the resolution as amended, we do not have to worry about being engaged in improper political activity.
I would like to read the resolution as it's amended. It's slightly different from the distribution that you received. It would read as follows. I'll read only the second paragraph. Be it therefore resolved that the Los Angeles Division of the Academic Senate urges the President of the University to arrange a fall calendar that recesses classes for the period of 2 weeks prior to the November elections to enable students to work for political candidates of their choice in a peaceful and democratic manner, period. And now the next words were struck out, and the next sentence added, be it understood that the academic days of the recess be added to the beginning and or the end of the presently drafted fall calendar. Nesbitt.
Point of clarification, Mr. Chairman. The words that you read that were stricken, I did not read when I read it orally because I had second thoughts about striking those. So.
Wait a minute, what's this now? I'm just reading what you gave.
Stay in this. Oh, you want that in?
I had inadvertently removed something that he had struck. He wants it left in to read as follows. Enable students to work for political candidates of their choice in a peaceful and democratic manner and without suffering academic penalty. He wanted that left in. Then the next sentence reads, be it understood that academic days are going to be added. Is there any more discussion of the amendment? Ladies. Now we're adding days at the end. That's the amendment.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I first understood Professor Nisbet's amendment to essentially recommend that the type of activity we're talking about during the regular period of instruction. And that is to say, in extended days and early mornings. I did not understand it to be to accept the original thrust of the resolution, to give release time, so to speak, and to fill it out on both sides. So I take this opportunity first to express that uncertainty, which I think can be cleared up readily, and secondly, to express my ambiguous feelings about this amendment. And if it isn't out of order, it does relate to the resolution as well. And it is simply this: I'm disturbed by the notion, with the best intentions, of setting aside 2 special weeks for people's consciences and their actions to address themselves to crucial matters such as political decisions. It's my firm conviction that where the situation is abiding, as is our political choice at all times, that it becomes something of a travesty to set aside 2 special weeks for work, and I feel very urgently that people should and will work throughout the rest of this year and summer and the fall if they care enough about this matter. My second point is that Professor Kaufman's thrust, which I thoroughly agree with, that such action might lead to an end of the war, is highly desirable. The motion doesn't read that way. It says political action for, as it must, of any persuasion. That persuasion can certainly include support of the present policies related to this war. In consequence, I would like to reserve these special calendar relationships for our campus for deeply special and emphatic events that we must address ourselves to at the time, and not for this kind of necessary and abiding type of activity, which I heartily endorse, but for which I, for one, would not set aside special time.
Professor Kaplan. Wait a minute, David, just a minute. Is there somebody? Here's somebody next door to you, Professor Matthews. Right. I'm trying to see everybody.
Name is Barthol, psychology. I am concerned now because our numbers are getting very much fewer. And if we pass a resolution of this kind now, I think it will not carry very much weight because there are so few people here. As I understand it, we will have another meeting prior to the close of this quarter. I propose that we table this motion until we can get a larger number of people here. I therefore move to table this motion until the next meeting before the end of this quarter.
Motion to the table is undebatable. All those in favor of... Oh, is there a second? All those in favor of tabling, please rise.
I'd like to second the motion. Is the chair going to permit for the seconding of the motion?
I would like to speak on the motion.
He has an amendment, and he wishes to speak.
It has been seconded. It has been seconded. During the past several days, through all the turmoil and all the extreme difficulties, there has been one very positive thing for me, and that is that I have found that I have come to know and love my students and many of my colleagues a great deal better than I learned to know and love them during a good many years of normal academic proceedings. Now, this may seem a curious introduction to the motion that I'm presenting, but I think perhaps the connection is clear. What I saw on last Tuesday and what I then saw documented in the process of going through a very large number of signed statements by people on this campus who saw things that no one person could see altogether gave me a picture and a sense and a feeling of horror that has changed me as a result of that experience. I wish I had the eloquence to express myself in a way that would change all of you who are listening to me in the same way. Some of the material, or at least a summarization of some of the material contained in those reports, has been circulated due to the efforts of students and faculty members, and some of you may well have seen it. It is being distributed around campus. I would like to add my voice very much to that of Professor Young in urging all of those persons, students, faculty members, who witnessed what took place or particular episodes, to give their statements to the Legal Aid Committee of the Law School of this university. This, too, will add to the abilities of the committees that we are setting up to act effectively. I want to make one other comment. I want to make one other comment, and that is that when Chancellor Young described the police as having overreacted, he was perhaps using an inaccurate word. The police did not overreact. They reacted precisely as they had been trained and instructed and conditioned to act. And they came on this campus determined to inflict physical punishment and harm on the members of the university community. I think this is frightful, and I think it is necessary that the Senate of this university express itself in strong language, and that is why I've offered the amendment. I've got another one.
We have this amendment before the House. Do we wish it read? All right. I will read the... It replaces number 1 in the Resolution 5 by the Los Angeles Division expresses its shock and revulsion at the deliberate brutality of the Los Angeles police officers towards students and faculty of UCLA. It supports the Chancellor in the establishment of a special committee to investigate the conduct of police on this campus and demands that the special committee publicize its finding and press for the indictment and prosecution of police officers who committed unlawful acts. All those in favor of the amendment, please stand. All those opposed? The ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, the second amendment is to add a sentence to paragraph 6 as follows: that the committee and the entire university community must press for the immediate dismissal of the large number of arbitrary and vindictive charges placed against students and faculty members.
This is for number 6. All those in favor?
Mr. Chairman.
Oh.
I'm not going to speak on this. I'm going to read 4 or 5 lines from an eyewitness account, and I think if you will bear with me, you should know this. This occurred in the research library of this university. This is a signed statement with many other witnesses to corroborate. I'm beginning in the middle to save time. The police have entered the library in rather large numbers with drawn nightsticks. At that point, the statement says, and I am not reading the name of the writer of this letter. At that point, I became aware that the police had accosted a student, a bystander who had been in the building and had not entered with the rush of students who had come in fleeing the police, watching and participating in setting up the new library book display. This student, this is in parenthesis, had won the Campbell Book Contest of the library last year and had gone on to win the National Book Award. These several officers began subduing the student, though this student did not appear to be struggling. The two officers were wrenching his arms behind his back, with the student lifted off his feet, while another officer had his nightstick at the student's throat, one hand on each side. Someone was saying, "You're choking him." His glasses and pipe fell to the floor, and he was crying, "Get Mr. Vosper, the university librarian, and you're breaking my arm, you're breaking my arm." The librarian who was setting up the display was shouting, "He didn't do anything." At this point, I heard a crack, and the student yelled, "You broke my arm, you broke my arm." I was told later that evening that this student was released that same afternoon by the police because there were no charges to place against him, because there was no legal basis for his arrest. And the statement concludes, his left arm was broken. Now this, I submit, applies to what I said of vindictive and arbitrary arrests, and is why I offered the Second Amendment.
All those in favor? All those in favor? All those in favor? Say aye. Those opposed? We now have those two amendments. Question has been called for on resolution number 5. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed?
Mr. Chairman,
I would now welcome...
item 6 concerns the interests of Chicanos, blacks, Asians, and Indians on this campus. I urge you to stay. Let me remind you again, Mr. Chairman, that item 6 is on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman?
May be recognized.
But I asked for just a report here, and I...
Mr. Chairman?
We could meet Thursday, or we...
No. I would like to make my report.
Would you make your report then?
Yes. My report is actually a number of resolutions.
Oh.
I think it's crucial for us at this time to remember that there are two overriding issues in our crisis today on this campus. The first crisis involves the war in Southeast Asia. But there's a second and equally important crisis, and this involves the racial crisis in America, and in particular, the crisis in minority education and ethnic studies at UCLA. So, speaking in behalf of Professors Juan Gomez, Simon Gonzalez, Raymond Orbach, and myself, I would like to introduce the following 3 resolutions. Be it resolved that the Academic Senate at the University of California at Los Angeles commit itself to the development of ethnic minority studies and programs. 2, that the entire university, not just the administration, but also departments and other agencies at UCLA, redefine its priorities, critically review its allocation of funding, and provide more resources for ethnic minority studies and programs. 3, that departments help to design and teach courses for students in the special education program and assist the high potential staff in the evaluation of their programs. Do I have a second? I would like to speak now on behalf of the three resolutions.
Professor Takaki, I said there would be a report on it, and we have your actually three resolutions. I don't think anyone here has actually read them. I would prefer to take this up at the recessed meeting when you have resolved them.
Do you remember our conversation?
Right.
I said in our conversation that I would be presenting resolutions, and you said that it would be in order.
I said that I would put it on as a report. I would like to have the campus community at least see these. All the rest of them were distributed.
I'm sure that it would not take much time, so may I proceed? I would like to speak now on behalf of my three resolutions. As I've already pointed out, we must not forget the second crisis that we face. Now, the crisis over ethnic minority programs and studies at UCLA was coming to a boil a long time before Nixon's policy over Cambodia and a long time before the happenings at Kent State. And the ethnic crisis, we must remember, will be with us for a long time after the crisis over Cambodia passes. And we must be prepared then to respond creatively to the crisis that faces us here on this campus. In our efforts to develop ethnic studies and minority programs at UCLA, we have become intensely aware of the need to have full and cooperative responses from the various departments and agencies at UCLA. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, I urge the adoption of the three resolutions. However, let me make the meaning of these three resolutions absolutely clear. My resolutions represent statements of policy and direction, and they mean nothing or little unless professors go back to their departments and make departmental policies to implement these three resolutions. Thank you.
Does the Assembly wish these read?
Yes.
Resolved that the Academic Senate of the University of California, Los Angeles commit itself to the development of ethnic minority studies and programs, that the entire university, not just the administration, but also departments and other agencies at UCLA, redefine its priorities, critically review its allocation of fundings, and provide more resources for ethnic minority studies and programs, that the departments help to design and teach courses for students in the special education program and assist the high potential program staff in the evaluation of their program.
Second.
All those in favor? Those opposed? All right, we'll now accept a motion to recess, and Professor Kaplan has asked to a few comments.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that we recess to 2 o'clock on Monday, May 18th. My reason for preferring Monday to Thursday is this. The regents will meet on Thursday and Friday. It would not surprise me if they were to take actions on those days to which the Senate might wish to reply. It is enormously difficult and complicated, as we have learned from long and sad experience, to call an emergency meeting. I would like to have our meeting prepared ahead of time for Monday. Monday, May 18th at 2 o'clock.
The recess until Monday at 2 o'clock. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it.
and we will. We can keep our own order. Thank you very much, LAPD. At the end of this rally or convocation or mass hysteria or whatever you want to call it, there will be a march from the east side of the pavilion at the flagpoles to Schönberg Quad. And when we get there, all of us, I hope, every single one of us, will break up into groups to plan action. Strike and rally organization, political education, inter-campus communication, and community communication. And we'll stay there, and we'll work there, and we'll stay on strike until the police are off and until some of our demands are at least dealt with and we have an adequate statement about them. But we've got to keep ourselves the people. We are the people, and we'll keep our own order. We don't want to get killed. We don't want to give anybody any excuse for killing us. So come with us, and we'll work together.
Our next speaker is Dr. Don Villarejo.
As the first faculty speaker, I would like to announce that I'm on strike till LAPD leave this campus. I think that we now have a great opportunity to unite all the people on this campus to shut this school down like they've done at Brown, like they've done at Boston University, like they've done at Tufts, like they're doing all over this country until this war ends. Last summer, I was invited to participate in a summer task force on war-related activities and ROTC. The majority recommendation of that task force was for the immediate abolition of ROTC. 1 year later, we're still sitting around, waiting, wondering what's going to happen to ROTC. If we think that somehow power is going to be magically given to us to do what the majority wills, we'll be waiting for a long time. Power isn't given, you have to take it! Now, what is it that we can do? I've heard some calls to burn down ROTC. That's not the way. That is not the way. The way is non-violently shut this place down until that war ends, until the police are off this campus. There are other things that are happening around this country that we have to pay some attention to as well. The political repression coming down on people who organized themselves in August of 1968 to protest the war, and the continuation of that repression all over this country cannot be tolerated. Free Bobby Seale, all power to the people.
Our next speaker is Miss Cheryl Dearmon.
Action but no direction. This campus was in a state of emergency yesterday, but as far as I'm concerned, this campus is constantly in a state of emergency when it pertains to black people. HPP and the whole SCP are emergencies. The medical students, black medical students, black law students, workers, black teachers are an extreme emergency. They were an emergency yesterday, they are an emergency today, and there will be an emergency tomorrow unless we determine the direction. And the black people know the direction that they're going in, and it's up to you to understand that. Positions will have to be defined, and people are going to have to be told what to do. There was direction. There was no direction yesterday. People wanted direction. They needed direction, and direction is what they're going to get. It is time that we as black students should stop letting people shout for the liberation of ourselves. We should stop letting people use our cause to springboard irrational actions. Burning down Campbell Hall and ransacking the administration building is not going to help HPP. It's not going to help special education. It's not going to help the black law students, the medical students, the teachers, the workers. It's not going to stop having black professors come on this campus and having them discriminated against because of their different ideologies. It's not going to stop. Yesterday I was called a racist because it seemed awfully funny to me that after the 4 white students were killed on Penn State's campus, but I never heard anyone say anything about the brothers and sisters who were killed at Orangeburg in South Carolina or in Texas Southern. I didn't see nothing happen here about that. I hear us talking about the war in Vietnam. I hear us talking about Cambodia. I ain't heard nobody say nothing about what's going on in Africa. I ain't heard nobody say nothing about Trinidad, who's trying to kick the imperialist powers of the United States out of there. It's a black country wanting to determine their own destination. They've been killing black people ever since they brought them from the shores of Africa. They've been killing us physically with the gun, mentally, politically, economically, and so it's no accident that Brother James Banks of the High Potential Program killed himself. It was no accident what happened to Johnny Bunchy. It was no accident what happened to Bobby Seals. It was no accident what happened to the brothers in Soledad Prison. And I say let's free them all. It's no accident what happened to HPP. It's no accident. It's no accident what happened to black students. And it's no accident when we take action and let people know what's happening. That ain't no accident. They are trying to systematically exclude black students from this campus. It is time for us to stop isolating ourselves from the situation and saying that that is them over there. Because when the mess hits the fan, there ain't gonna be no good niggas. There ain't gonna be no bad niggas. There ain't gonna be no high niggas, no middle niggas, no low niggas. They gonna come and get us all. We have no rights that they respect whatsoever. We never had, and we won't until we demand them. Yeah, Cambodia is out of sight thing. I still ain't seen nothing done about what's going on in Trinidad or South Africa. Nothing whatsoever. White students were killed, but so were black students. We had a brother yesterday who was sitting down eating a hot dog when the pigs came along and took him off. I'd like to know what the crime was. Was the crime of him eating a hot dog, or was the crime of him being black? And I think it's obvious what it was. Let it be known that there was no mistake when the pigs came into Campbell Hall. They didn't come in to protect us. They came in to get us. Yesterday, things were normal in Campbell Hall. Students would go into class in hopes of getting a new start for a so-called last chance within the university and the educational system of this establishment. There were those who came along for the free ride at the expense of others also. It is now time for us as a collective body to either be the solution or a part of the problem. It is time to exert ourselves and define our own direction and stop letting others do it for us. We must stop letting people limit the enrollment of black students in this university. We must stop letting administrators walk out on us in a time of crisis. So we demand that there be abolishment of the 800 quota that is set for the SEP program. We demand that 11% of enrollment in all departments in this university be opened up to black people. We demand an autonomous SEP program which is controlled by a certain sector of this university and black people have no voice in it whatsoever. We demand that the Black Studies Department be autonomous from this control of the university. We demand that the replacement of the advisory faculty board that sits between HPP and the Chancellor's office be abolished and be replaced with students and progressive faculty members who we will choose, not the university, but what the people choose. We will support the strike. As far as our mans are concerned, you can do whatever you want to do with this place. But these demands must be met, and we will not rest until they are. We will not be excluded from this university. In fact, we want more black students on this campus. And if you agree with these demands, just stand up and give me the sign. And I say it's up to us to free Bobby Seals, to free the Soledad prisoners, to get the United States out of Trinidad, and get all them fools out of Africa. All power to the people.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Yuji Ichioka.
I'm here today speaking on behalf of the Asian American Studies Center. 2 of our students were busted yesterday, and I'm speaking on their behalf, as well as all the other students involved with our center, as well as with the staff. Now, what I have to say is very simple. The invasion of Cambodia and the resumption of bombing of North Vietnam is a criminal act. It is not an unwise policy, as Chancellor Young said. It is a criminal act. And it is a criminal act perpetrated upon yellow people. At home, the repression of the anti-war movement, the Black Panther Party, as well as what's happened at Kent State, these are also criminal acts. Now, the issues here at UCLA, one is ROTC. Did Chancellor Young mention anything about that? We say Abolish it immediately and unconditionally. Did Chancellor Young mention anything about war-related research? We say abolish it immediately and unconditionally. Did Chancellor Young mention anything about the cutbacks in the minority program? We say we will oppose it, and we stand with the other minorities in opposition to any kind of cutbacks. Lastly, we support the idea of just striking this school until the administration is prepared to act on these three crucial issues: ROTC, war-related research, and the minority program. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Reynaldo Macias.
Chicano, Chicano, puertorriqueño, latino, chicano, que viva la raza, que viva la raza nueva.
There are some of us left alive in this country. How many of you have heard the word racism? How many of you have heard the word imperialism? How many of you have heard the word oppression or repression? Because the people that use each of those words are talking about the same thing. Imperialism in Southeast Asia, imperialism in Trinidad, imperialism in Latino America, in Puerto Rico, in Africa. Es la misma cosa. It's racism. You don't see the United States imperialism in Europe. That racism, that imperialism is part of a system called the American government. It's part of an authority system that calls a president, a Congress, judges as the proper channels in which to channel dissent. Chancellor Young talked about those proper channels, but I didn't see him ask the students what he should write down in his letter to the president or in his letter to HEW. If we can't advise Chancellor Young, why should we let him advise us on what to do? Just as the third world, los mestizos, the Asians, Africa, and the oppressed whites, just as all of them are being affected by a system of what is called government, so must we all talk not only about a free Puerto Rico or a free Asia, but also a free campus. Students are being oppressed at UCLA. There is a racism against students at UCLA. There is an imperialism against students at UCLA. The judges and the courts, as many of you are finding out, are not friends of the people who elect or select or are supposed to do that, the representatives in Congress or the government. Party politics does not respond to what the citizen, if he is allowed to be a citizen, wants. This government is a system that oppresses you and oppresses the minorities in this country. When the 4 students in Kent, Ohio were killed, the 8 students now were assassinated, murdered by part of that system, whether you call it the National Guard, the police, or the government. They declared war again on students and on oppressed people in this country. When we talk about freeing political prisoners, we talk about all those political prisoners in jails and in concentration camps in this entire country and in the courts. Bobby Seale, Reyes Tijerina, y los otros. When we talk about getting the U.S. out of Cambodia and Laos, we're talking about getting them out of the imperialistic bag in whatever country, in whatever nation a people is being oppressed in. Self-determination. And you, as part of this community on this campus, must determine your own destiny. Must determine what you want UCLA to be and where UCLA is to go. You are UCLA if you want to be. But so long as people in this country say they are trying to get all sides, and even with that information that they get, do not begin to act upon that information, they become part of the system. The reason that Century City could take place, the reason that Chicanos can get killed in the barrios every day, the reason that students can be oppressed in this country every semester or quarter, is because the people do not stand and speak. And when they do, people are afraid to act because they haven't dealt with themselves and with the issue on whatever amount of information they have. And it is up to the people to seek the information and to decide for themselves where they are going to go. Not for a system that is oppressive, imperialistic, and racist. And that is basically the demand. That is basically the call that the Chicano and the Puerto Riqueño students on this campus have put to the chancellor. They put it to them on April 17th when we submitted our proposal for consolidation of all Chicano programs on this campus, not the fragmented divide and conquer that the system has been using on us for years and years and centuries. We want a consolidation of a community within a larger community. HPP, Cultural Center, a program here, a program there. Those are labels that the system has given to identify a group. We talk about a community, a Chicano community within this campus. We want a consolidation programmatically and spiritually of that community. Along with that, we demand the right that we have to come to this university and to determine our destiny here. And to that extent, we have demanded that we have 500 new Chicano students in the fall. Because that is what we decide as the number and not the part of the system, the administration, or Reagan when he uses his blue pencil to dye his toenail. To end, I ask you, don't sit in front of the television set and watch the system beat on somebody else's head, or Vietnam and Kent, Ohio to continue with a beer in one hand and maybe something else in the other. And not be affected by it. All of you are here for one reason or another, best known to yourselves. Make that reason known, and make it known through the expression of that reason in action, in campus action. That all of us, to have those reasons met and the system responsive to the people in this country, we must act for the things that I've stated and for the things that are best known to you. ¡Que viva la raza! ¡Puertorriqueño! ¡Chicano! ¡Que viva la raza nueva! ¡Que viva Puerto Rico libre! ¡Que viva UCLA libre! Gracias.
Mr. Keith Dodds.
We're all here to talk about a strike. What I would submit to you is that there are two very different conceptions of what kind of strike we're talking about here. Chancellor Young has called for a strike. I talked to Keith Schiller after he got through speaking. I said, Keith, how long do you want that strike to go on? Keith said, well, I want it to go through till Friday. I would point out to you, to talk about what kind of people are asking for that kind of strike, that I just read a press release that said Ronald Reagan has asked that the universities be shut down till next Sunday. That's the kind of strike, that Chancellor Young is calling for. I would submit to you that that is a dead-end strategy, that will not win us anything. All right, I want to ask some questions. Those are the kind of people that are calling for that strike. Chancellor Young and Ronald Reagan. Who called the cops on this campus? Who fired Mike Schwartz for being at an SDS demonstration? Who, as an ugly rumor is going around with increasing validity, is going to stall on Angela Davis until the end of this quarter, and then when summer quarter starts and nobody's around, fire Angela Davis? Who was it that talks about his remorse and regret over the killings in Kent and the move into Cambodia, but says nothing about ROTC and the Thailand Project, which contribute to U.S. imperialism in Southeast Asia? All right, we know who's calling for that kind of strike, a dead-end strategy that gets us nowhere and wins us nothing. I would submit to you that there is an alternative form of a strike that the minority speakers that preceded me talked about, a strike to win real, concrete demands, a strike that is not just in sympathy and protest with what's going on in Cambodia, although certainly our strike will fit in with a wave of strikes across the country. I understand now it's about 135 campuses that are shut down. But I would urge to you that in this situation, one very clear thing is going to happen. Chancellor Young realizes that there is a crisis on this campus, as does Ronald Reagan, and on the campuses throughout this country. What they are going to try to do is dead-end it and shut it off so that by next Sunday, nothing else is going on. What we ought to do is have a real strike that is not only in sympathy with the national demands, but that is aimed at staying on strike until our real and concrete demands are won at this university. All right. What are those demands? Tonight at 7 o'clock at the University Religious Conference, there's going to be a mass meeting. You all should come to that to work on the kind of strike I'm talking about. Furthermore, there's going to be a march to Schoenberg Quad. There are 4 committees set up there. There are tables and signs up there to work on the kind of strike I'm talking about. The kinds of demands around that strike are fairly clear. We need to strike in support of the demands of the BSU and the Chicano students.
if we're concerned about racism, if we're concerned about Bobby Seale and the Black Panther Party, we need to support the minority students on this campus. Okay, we need to demand that the university, as Yale is shut down over, contribute money to the Bobby Seale Defense Fund. On this campus, concretely, we need to demand an end to university complicity with law enforcement agencies and with the regents, and end to the political oppression of Mike Schwartz, Angela Davis, and Mike Tiger, and all students, faculty, and workers that are being repressed by this administration. Furthermore, let those administrators and let those governors that now come to us and tell us of their bereavement and of their tears over the people that have been killed and over the extension of the war in Southeast Asia, let those people take concrete action by ending ROTC and by stopping all war-related research, specifically the Thailand Project. This Saturday, there's going to be an emergency rally at 11 a.m. in Exposition Park at Figueroa and Santa Barbara to link up our struggle with the struggles of other campuses, workers, and students around the Los Angeles area. We ought to be there. But I would urge you to think clearly, to think very clearly about the two kinds of strikes that are being talked about here today. The kind of strike that we were called here to talk about, that this convocation is called about, is going to end up Sunday or Friday. Anyway, by the start of next school week, it's going to be over. We're going to be back in class, and we will not have won anything. The kind of strike I'm talking about and that I think we need to act on, that I think that our march to Schoenberg and that our activity in the committees that are going to be working out of there, that kind of strike needs to go on until our demands are met. All right, there's a bullhorn up in this area right over here. Does somebody have that bullhorn? At the conclusion of the speeches, there are going to be some other academics and some other professors that are going to get up here and blow to you. Now, I don't want to preempt them because I think that might displease a lot of you. But as they're speaking, let them talk about what kind of strike they're talking about. A dead-end strike or a strike that will win our demands. And after they finish blowing, let us march to Schoenberg Quad, get in those committees, and win a real strike.
I have three announcements. One is in reference to the march that Keith referred to that will take place from the pavilion up into the Schoenberg Quad for planning. I've also received a notice, and I will read it to you. I am advising this assembly on behalf of the Chancellor, this is from Vice Chancellor Saxon, who has received notice from President Hitch. At the request of Governor Reagan, all classes will be canceled effective immediately and through the weekend. If you wish, I have here the AP teletype story on this, and I'll read it to you. Sacramento. Governor Reagan said today he has asked all University of California and State College campus to shut down effective Thursday through the weekend. Reagan said UC President Charles Hitch and State College Chancellor Glenn Dumke, quote, strongly concurred, unquote, in his request. Quote, it is essential for our college and university faculty, students, and administrations to reflect on the grave sequence of current events and to consider their responsibility to themselves and our society. Our next speaker is Dr. Hayden White.
I'm a faculty member, but I don't blow. The students and the faculties of this country, have been told to seek the usual means of communicating with the powers that be in transmitting their dissatisfaction with all the events that transpired, not just last week or not just last month, but over the last 10 years. At the same time, Mr. Nixon calls you all bums if you don't wrap yourself in the flag in the way that he does. To justify policies that can only be characterized as genocidal. Vice President Agnew responds to the events in Ohio with the observation that these shootings show the perils of dissent. Is that laying down the gauntlet? Is that supposed to open up dialogue? Last night, Chief Davis appeared on the George Putnam News Hour. Even though it made my stomach turn to listen closely to what he was saying, I did take down verbatim 7 points that he made in his references to what had happened on this campus yesterday. Okay. He calls these disruptions the second stage of a revolution to take over the United States. On the authority of his reading of Jerry Rubin's book, Do It. It's interesting to see that he can read. He said to the citizens of Los Angeles, they're trying to burn your city. He called upon the professors to see that there is peace there, that is to say, on the campus. At the same time, he said maybe the institutions of higher learning in this country have to be put in mothballs in order to give ourselves over to the training of young people so that they'll grow up to be respectful of authority. He criticizes the release of those arrested in the cafeteria sit-in. He criticizes the release of them. He judges as well as picks them up. And finally, when George Putnam asked him what was wrong with this country, he says it's lacking in gonads. That's a quote. Finally, he warned that before this is over, there will be many criminal conspiracy charges brought against those who participate in demonstrations and disruptions. First of all, we must get the pigs off campus. They didn't come here last June and for the first time. They've been here all along in our classes as undercover agents, as agents provocateurs. And as indifferent students. Now, the issues beyond that are to close up the ROTC operation completely, to sever our relationship with the Livermore and the Los Alamos projects completely and irrevocably, and to make sure that this university is opened up as a genuinely democratic community, that the elitism that is built into the structure of this society is destroyed and dissolved. It's been said that we'll be playing into Governor Reagan's hands if we call a strike after he has shut down the schools. Well, don't let them run you off this campus. You can strike and you can stay here, and those pigs have got to go. That's the first thing that must happen. You've been talked at long enough. Do you want to strike?
I've been asked, ladies and gentlemen, to remind you of the 4 committees that will be meeting at the conclusion of this meeting after the march up to Schoenberg Quad. Legal aid, medical aid, communications, and community communications. And they'll also be meeting in Kirchhoff 325. I'm also asked to indicate that people willing to help with medical aid now should meet immediately in Kirchhoff 408A. Our next speaker is Dr. Arnold Kaufman.
I am speaking to you principally on behalf of Local 1990, the American Federation of Teachers. Yesterday, I stood in my office, looking out the window in shock and bewilderment. As I saw Professor Peter Ladefoged brutally assaulted, mercilessly beaten by 2 or 3 members of the LAPD. It was an outrage, a sickening exhibition of wanton violence. I saw Professor Ladefoged stand firm, interposing himself between the students and the oncoming police in the middle of the block that runs west of the social welfare building. And I saw the police literally run him down and then mercilessly beat on him with clubs for over 2 minutes. He offered not one particle of resistance, and they beat on him. I know that the fundamental responsibility for the events of the last few days lies with those leaders who have decided to pursue an even madder course in Southeast Asia than they have been pursuing, if that's possible. I know that young policemen and young soldiers are first frightened, then angered, then brutalized by epithets and swirling crowds. And my purpose here is not to blame them. That seems to me to be quite futile. I think it's perhaps possible to express my feelings better in aesthetic ways. The spectacle of police brutality that I witnessed yesterday was rancid and foul. But more disgusting by far is the spectacle of men of alleged moderation and responsibility who cannot speak loudly, clearly, and forthrightly about the fundamental evils that resulted in yesterday's outrages. University presidents who have spoken out against the war on Southeast Asia have only joined their voices after 5 years of speaking out. I want to, on behalf of the AFT, remind the Chancellor of the brutality practiced on Professor Ladefoged and others, and we call on the Chancellor to condemn these brutalities, to remove the LAPD from our campus, to disarm the campus police, to refrain from all suspensions of those who have been arrested, and to establish an official tribunal to look into those arrests and determine where the responsibility lies, and we think it lies primarily with the police.
2,000 people people have left this convocation already.
We-
Get your goddamn speech.
We call on the Chancellor and Vice Chancellor Sexton. We censure them by vote, unanimous vote of the AFT today. We call on them to condemn the senseless slaughter in Kent State. Please, I'm authorized by the union to report these votes. Please permit me to finish. I've been asked to perform a task for my union, and I will try to do that. We condemn President Nixon's callous statement imputing responsibility to those who were disorderly here and there, rather than those who were set out to maim and kill and burn and lie and manipulate and destroy all that is finest about this republic, both at home and abroad. And we ask the Chancellor to speak out on these. Local 1990, by unanimous vote, called on its member this morning before the governor's announcement was made to join in a strike. I'm going to recommend to Local 1990 that we resume a strike after any formal close down is called by the governor for a period of 3 days subsequent to that. We specifically call on the medical facilities in this university to be present when there are crises like yesterday's. We support the work stoppage by secretaries of the sociology and anthropology departments, and we encourage further organization by secretaries and other staff members of the campus. Let me conclude with very few personal remarks, not as an official representative of the union, but for myself. I favor the abolition of ROTC. I favor the suspension of all research which is inimical to academic freedom, that is to say, education in an examined life. I favor the formation of a client-controlled child care center. I favor the expansion of the high potential program and the creation of a program like or even larger than the one that has been recently implemented at the University of Michigan. And I warn the Chancellor that in his deliberations between now and I hope within 2 days, that he should not permit himself to become an instrument of Ronald Reagan and the regents of this university. He should not permit himself any longer to be a tool and should reappoint Angela Davis for next year. With the general support of our union, we can undergird reason in the service of a decent education. And I speak now to other faculty members who are here. With your help, the faculty can reverse the process by which it is being made increasingly vulnerable to budgetary and political hysteria. With your help, we can develop a program that will enable us to do our collective duty. Join the union, because without your help, we will continue to be what we have become, a functionally apathetic crowd of anxious intellectuals yearning for that happy day when power devoid of mind will come to appreciate mind devoid of power. Thank you.
I think we've been talked at a lot today. I think we know what the issues are. I think we know that human beings are being killed and maimed and brutalized in Vietnam and Cambodia and Africa, in our backyards right here in the black communities and the Chicano communities and on the campuses too. I think that what we have to do now is talk about taking action. We should all get up and go up to Schoenberg Quad and talk about exercising the power, exercising the only power that a powerless people have. Let's move, let's take action now. All power to the people.
On strike. It's on strike. On strike! Shut it down!
Let's march.
You can march. We've got other speakers who may want to say something.
No, but
Well, there's a gentleman here that wants
they're
to say.
dissipating all the...
I know, but it was an open, it's not a program, it's a meeting.
Can he
People want to
speak
leave,
at
they certainly have.
Schoenberg? Can he speak at the people or at Schoenberg?
Okay. Yuri, do you want to speak at Schoenberg? Would you like, that's where they're going to be
People are
doing the
there. It
action
doesn't
rather
make
than the
sense-
talking.
It doesn't make sense to talk to scattering crowds.
Would you like to
We should
speak
all
up
leave
there?
together.
Yeah, what am I say? Well, Yuri,
I just have two things to say to you. First of all, I owe my life to some black people. When I was just a little boy, some black soldiers found me in a house in Austria, and they gave me enough food so that I could live for a week. The second thing that I want to say is that I love you. All of you. Black, brown, white. I am very worried that some of these people will turn this campus into a bloodbath that you haven't seen, but I have. And I remember how it looks like. I remember how corpses look when they lie on the street. Now, these leaders do not care if your blood is on the street. These leaders do not care if you die, but you'll care, and I think I'll care, because I see God in your sensitive eyes. There is no reason for you to die unless you want to die. Don't let anyone lead you into death unless you want to go to death. And dying in this kind of thing is very simple. Chicanos, amigos, amigos, I love you. I love your music. I love your temperament. I love your flamingo. Listen, I love you. Okay, okay, no bloodbath. Take it easy.
Yuri, beg pardon? I think this concludes our assembly here in Pauley. I'm sure that this is only the beginning. There will be the gathering in Schoenberg Quad for assignments and assumption of responsibilities in planning further action. Thank you very much for your attendance.